The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a new story that hasn't been in any of the Afterlife Interrupted book series. I'll first tell the story, and then in the next two podcasts, we'll go into a compassionate response to this story and then to some sort of spiritual practice that might derive from it. The story is one that is somewhat related to the last one that we just did. That was Nadi, who was an Iraqi businessman who died in the violence that plagued Iraq. This one is another story of violence in a predominantly Muslim country. Let me tell you the dream as it was received, as it came to me during the night of September the 3rd of 2024. I was with a small group of people in an underground enclosed space like a bunker. The way out was a narrow slit above us. Someone poured gasoline and lit a match. We wouldn't all escape, and I awoke. Well, I'm sorry to bring you such a ghastly story, but I wouldn't bring it to you if it didn't have the elements of healing and a happier ending that I've come to understand is the way this works. Thanks be to God. It turned out that we were in Libya somewhere about 20 years ago, is what we learned, after the fall of the government of Libya, and while there was no real established government to follow it. Sometimes that's called a failed state. And when a state fails, people begin to fight for little bits of turf. What happened here was we were told that this was a basement, and the slit of light wasn't really a way out. It was just a little bit of a window that had no glass in it, but it was commonly the way that these urban buildings in Libya were built, that most had a basement. They had some little slit at the street level to allow in some air. There would have been a stair somewhere in the basement up to the first floor, but during this street fighting and kind of guerrilla war in an urban setting, there were militias who we were told were not really ideologically different from one another. They were just fighting over turf like gangs. Many of them were just trying to reestablish some sort of order after the collapse of the state. Sometimes they were trying to get roads cleared and have access to the airport or whatever. But they found it difficult to work with other militias doing the same thing in their own little areas. And so there was this street to street fighting. As we frequently do, asked to speak to a guardian angel to give us clarity, because dreams by their very nature have some ambiguity built into them. There can be symbology or just a lack of detail that leaves you wondering, what was that all about? Remember that when these dreams come to me, they feel so different from my own dreams. There's no mistaking them for what I call a contact dream. This is somebody reaching out. And even though the events are horrific to describe, I don't receive them as though I was just in a nightmare. I don't wake up screaming or with my heart racing. I don't know, I'm just buffered. I'm protected from that kind of thing. But it seemed like there was a group of people in this bunker, and the last line of it was, we wouldn't all escape. So I was pretty sure that somebody who had died would narrate and explain, be the spokesperson for us. We very frequently ask for a guardian angel to come on the line first. They're so sweet, and they're all about truth. They're very compassionate. Normally, we ask for the guardian of an individual who died, but this seemed like a group. So we just said, would a guardian who could help us get started today please step up? I get quiet for just a moment, and I begin, as I did in this case, usually to hear the formation of a name. This sounded like Salam, Salaam, which I knew was close to shalom, the Hebrew word for peace. And I was pretty sure that salam was the Arabic word for peace. So I was hearing the name, and then that guardian came through and said, yes, that's exactly right. Um, I was talking to Karen, one of my prayer partners, and she was Googling it in the meanwhile. Karen really developed a loving rapport with this angel and the woman that we'll be introducing you to in this show. Salam described the breakdown of order and said that many of the combatants were angry young men, and that many people who were not disposed to be angry were angry because their family had been murdered. Uh, as violence escalates, even people who don't normally have a violent temper can be drawn into the fray. And so the angel Salam was saying many young men were fighting each other, and uh, lots of non-combatant civilians were caught in the crossfire. She explained that because things were so unstable at street level or above it, and maybe a two-story dwelling, that many people in the neighborhoods had decided to do the same thing, and that was to try to move into their basement and even bring furniture from the living room down into the basement, maybe rugs and whatever they could do to try to make the basement a little more comfortable because they had to live in it. Many people had chosen to take their extended families and draw them all together. So if the grandparents lived in another neighborhood nearby and there's violence, you're wondering if they're safe. So a lot of people felt like the best thing to do was to bring the extended families together where we could all be in one place. Um, then there could be common care for cooking and so on. But at the same time, there was very little privacy, um, poor sanitation, the daily irritants of living in very close quarters with lots of other people. So there was a lot of hardship before the bad day when somebody actually poured gasoline, and this slit was just this little bit of a window for some airflow, and somebody poured gas in it and lit it. And they died. The angel mentioned that a few lingered for a time, and they were probably less fortunate, the ones who died quickly because of the extent of their injuries. Anyway, leaving that scene behind, where they ended up was in an afterlife place that was populated by people who had shared a similar experience. So they weren't all necessarily in that room. They weren't even necessarily from that time and place, that country. It could have been other countries where there had been similar urban fighting. But the thing they all had in common was they had been through this kind of trauma and were healing from it at their own pace. The guardian angel mentioned, as you know, when people have been through a trauma and they're healing, they're not all going to do it in lockstep. That's going to happen individually as people move through whatever it is they need to do. Salam assured us that there would be some in this group who would be ready to move from this therapeutic level to something more peaceful and more joyful, but that not everybody in the environment would necessarily be ready to do that. No one would be shamed if they decided to stay behind, but that we would be facilitating the movement of some people from this afterlife place of healing to something better for those who didn't need it any longer. Well, we're used to that. And we get these kind of these collective crossings, maybe like one out of 15 or 20 or like that. Anyway, after Salam made sure that we were good with what we needed to understand, a woman emerged, and her name is Saba, Saba. She's a really delightful lady. She mentioned that she was a married woman whose children were largely raised to adulthood at the time that this violence befell them. She had not only been a homemaker, but she was a small businesswoman. She had some sort of market. She exchanged some exchange of goods. She said even after the everything collapsed into this chaotic violence. She said, I still had contacts with distributors of different kinds of things, and sometimes I would be made aware that a shipment of oranges was going to be coming, or maybe of olive oil. So a ship or a truck, somehow there was going to be some good that people would want to have. And she said, people were hungry. The regular marketplaces were, war zones, and people had to do the best they could to scavenge to be able to keep themselves alive. So she said there was a sort of black market that materialized in the absence of a peacetime economy. She mentioned that it was difficult because we were living in such close quarters and had poor sanitation, we were prone to illness. That if someone got a sore throat, everybody got it. And there wasn't necessarily antiseptic, scrapes and cuts of the skin. If there weren't bandages or antiseptic, that some of these things could become much more of a problem than they would have been in peacetime. So she said we had a really difficult life. Well, it ended in a violent act, and she ended up in this other afterlife place. She told us, so you've already heard what my circumstance was, and I don't think I really need to say much more. I think we've been told that there'll be some way that movement will happen. Maybe there'll be some sort of conveyance. She mentioned possibly a bus, but then she said even our buses could be dangerous. People put bombs in them and they exploded. So she said somehow there'll be some way we'll be invited into movement and we'll go from place to place, but no one will be shamed if they decide to stay behind if they're not quite ready. Well, when it did come toward the end of this session, it wasn't a bus and it wasn't any other kind of public transportation. She said, all we're being told is that it's peacetime now, and we're going to leave this place where we've been, and we're going to go through a door into a courtyard, and we're going to celebrate like Eid, E-I-D. I was once a campus minister at Stanford where the Catholic community had university provided facilities that were alongside Muslims. We shared the same daily prayer space. So I got to know some of my Muslim colleagues, and I knew that Eid is a celebration. And actually, there are more than one kinds of Eid, but the big one after Ramadan is usually just called that. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm going to spell it for you. EID dash AL dash FITR. Fatir. I'm probably getting that wrong. But Muslims commonly will call that big one as Ramadan ends just Eid. Well, if you know a little bit about Muslims as I do, just enough to be ignorant, um, during Ramadan, people who are observing the fast don't eat from sunrise to sunset. They eat before or after, and they do that for weeks. When it ends, there's a celebration of food and drink, and everyone was, aware of that and looked forward to it. Well, Saba told us that what we're being invited into, she could see through like double doors that looked onto a patio. And she said she said, when we're going to go into a place that's like what our own land was like before it was at war. So they weren't going into some like heavenly paradise. They were just going into the place they lived in that was familiar, but without war. They were remembering a better day or maybe seeing a better future in the place that was already beloved because it was their own. She said, we didn't just make one big pile of food necessarily because it was a collaborative feast. And you might call it a progressive dinner, where she said we would have some bit of food at this place and then we would move to the neighbors or a little down the street. And as we moved, there might be music and dancing. And she said, so there was freedom to move. She later spoke about, she said, sometimes you might go to, for example, a wedding reception and be in a crowded room where you have been assigned a seat between two other people at a table and it's difficult to move. You're really kind of trapped there for the rest of the evening, engaging only these two people or a few others at the table. So this is not like that at all. Everyone is free to move about. There's joy, there's abundance of food, music, everything. Uh, so she said it's a lovely party. Well, we never tell these stories in a book or now on a podcast without getting permission. So recently, just a week ago, we went back into prayer and asked about this story and could we have permission to tell it. So we got to talk to Angel Salam and to Saba to get their permissions. And that was lovely. I enjoy those. Angel Salam was saying about we were asking, now that you've gotten Saba to safety and onto the next thing, what's next for you? And Salam was saying, well, I have the possibility of going back into guarding a next human life upon the earth. He said, I'm not sure if that's what I will do. He said, I'm because I am eternal, I'm quite old. So I'm used to adaptability that comes with having done many things over a very long life. So he said, I'm really not concerned about it. It will emerge. Something will be the next thing for me. But right now, I'm just enjoying a bit of a break. We were talking about who's at the party, and Saba said, well, many of us are with people that we loved who had died, and so we're having reunions with loved ones who we knew upon the earth. But she said part of what we're doing too is we're mixing with ancestors who we didn't meet during our lifetime on the earth because they had died before we were born. So people up the family line was another uh, joy to meet your ancestors that you really didn't know. And then between them, I think it was Angel Salam that said, one of the things that's joyful here is the mixing of human souls and angels. Said, and then he said, there might have been a day when in your human life, someone brought home a puppy. And even though this is a different kind of being than you, and you can't communicate with them as you do with other humans, there's delight, there's joy, and the little puppy might try to communicate things to you, and you might talk to it and let it know that you are happy that it's here, that you love it, that this is their home. That it's easier for us angels and humans to interact because we can talk with each other, but there's still a joy of discovery because we're different from one another, and there's just excitement about meeting these others. And so one of the aspects of this party was human souls meeting angels and having food and drink with them. So anyway, it was just a nice party. They also told us that there are some who didn't come with us right away, but who are now further along in their healing and intrigued with maybe it's time, maybe I can do that. And she said one of the things that happens at the party is we'll see some new soul who's being escorted gently into this place to sort of put their toe in the water and see if this is something where they might like to stay. They don't have to. And I think Saba gave an example that would be from my life as a campus minister. She said you might be familiar with parents of a high school senior who bring them to the college campus for a brief visit to see if this is the place they'd like to go next. So she said that it's delightful when we see somebody that's either arriving to stay or even testing it out, that there's a joy in seeing that someone is healing sufficiently from the trauma that befell them that they're now either ready or nearly so to come to the party. Well, um, I think you get the picture. I hope you do. Um, in the next episode, we'll go into some compassionate response to this story. And I can't look away from Gaza and Ukraine and maybe Congo, um, parts of Nigeria where there's a lot of religious violence. I know very well that I'm living on the earth at a time when some of my fellow human beings are in horrific circumstances like Saba and her people were, and are scrambling to just trying to stay alive in war zones. So I'm sure that in the next episode, I'll be trying to express some ideas about what our compassionate response to this story might be that's contemporary. And then later we'll go on to some spiritual practice that might accompany this story. But that's going to be it for now. I'm grateful that you paid attention to this. If you have any questions for me about this, you can find me through my website, which is nathan-castle.com. There's a contact button where a drop-down little form comes on. I like to know where you are. I prefer a phone number because I'd rather text and talk than write emails. But I do ask that if you have questions about our process, these dreams, the writing it down, the crossings, the recording of them, all of that, please read one of the three books first. That way, when we do talk, I'm not having to explain things that are easily explained already in print. And our conversation will be richer if you do that. Remember, too, that I believe I have a calling to pray for you. I am grateful that this podcast interests you, and I believe it has healing messages embedded in it. When I pray for you, I pray that the Holy Spirit, which I think is airborne, that seeps into cracks and crevices, we breathe in the Spirit of God through our nostrils, our mouth, that anywhere in you where there's anything that saddens, accuses, anything that holds you back, steals your joy, even if it happened long ago, I pray that the Holy Spirit, who knows you through and through, will find ways to seek out receptivity in you to some healing that hasn't happened until now. So that's the way I pray for you as I pray for you. But for now, that's it for this episode. So I'm grateful that you joined me. I'm Father Nathan Castle, host of the Joyful Friar, saying goodbye and God bless. Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless. Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning, being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com. God bless you.